The Omega pretended to be mute for 8 years, until the Alpha King learned the truth. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the main characters. Emma Wilson had spent the last 8 years pretending to be mute. It wasn't something she had ever chosen, but it was something that had become necessary. The world around her was a place of constant judgment, harsh whispers, and never-ending rejection. As an Omega, she had always felt small, overlooked, and weak. But when Emma had been young, she had been given a cruel choice: remain silent or be cast aside. She had chosen silence, not because it was easy, but because it was her only form of protection. She had never expected anyone to understand, especially not the Alpha King, Alexander Thorne. Alexander had always ruled with power and an iron fist, known for his cold demeanor and his inability to trust anyone. Yet, he had found himself intrigued by the quiet Omega girl in his kingdom, the one who never spoke, never begged, and never showed fear. Her silence was like a puzzle he couldn't solve, and for once, it disturbed him. Little did Emma know, her quietness was the key to a revelation neither she nor Alexander had anticipated. On the day the Alpha King finally learned the truth, everything changed. It wasn't the discovery of her true voice that caught him off guard. It was the reason behind it. Emma had carried the weight of her secret for so long, hidden behind a wall of silence. The Alpha King, once dismissive and indifferent, now found himself questioning everything he thought he knew about power, about strength, and about the mysterious Omega who had somehow entered his life. She wasn't just the mute girl he had once pitied. She was someone much more, and the truth would unfold in a way neither of them had expected. Emma's silence wasn't a weakness. It was a shield she had built, to protect herself from a world that never cared about the truth. And now, it was up to the Alpha King to decide whether that truth would change the course of their lives forever. "I have been following you for so long," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper as the Alpha King stood before her, his gaze fixed on her in a way that made her heart race. She could feel the weight of his stare, the power he radiated even without speaking. "I didn't want to be weak. I didn't want to be vulnerable. So, I became silent, thinking it would protect me." Alexander, the Alpha King, stood still, his arms crossed over his chest, his sharp silver eyes never leaving her face. There was a moment of heavy silence between them before he spoke, his voice low and filled with an emotion Emma hadn't expected. "You don't need to be silent to protect yourself," he said. "You've already shown strength. But now I need to know why. Why did you hide this from me?" Emma closed her eyes for a brief second, gathering the strength to speak the truth, something she had buried deep for so long. She had never told anyone, not even those closest to her, about the pain that had led her to this silence. The years of being ignored, the rejection she had faced for being an Omega, the harsh words from those who deemed her worthless. And worse, the fear that if she ever spoke, it would be another reminder of her failure. She had convinced herself that her voice was not worth hearing, that she would be more accepted in silence. But now, in front of the Alpha King, those walls she had carefully built for so long began to crack. "Because I was afraid," Emma continued, her voice trembling slightly. "Afraid of what would happen if I let myself be heard. I was never allowed to be anything but a quiet, unnoticed Omega. The world never gave me a chance to speak." Alexander's expression softened as he stepped closer, his presence overwhelming yet not intimidating. "You don't need to be afraid anymore," he said, his words gentle but firm. "I'm not here to judge you. I want to understand. Tell me why you've been silent all this time." Emma hesitated, feeling the weight of the moment. The truth was out, and now she had to face the consequences. But something about the way the Alpha King looked at her, as if he truly cared, made her feel like she could trust him. "I wanted to be someone else. Someone who could fit in. Someone who wouldn't be cast aside. But I realize now that I've been hiding from who I truly am," she admitted. Her heart beat faster as she spoke, the weight of her own admission settling in her chest. Alexander listened intently, his gaze unwavering. "You don't have to hide anymore," he said softly. You are exactly who you need to be. And I'm here, standing with you. Whatever happens, I'm not going to leave you. Emma felt a warmth spread through her chest as she looked at him, her thoughts racing. Could it really be that simple? Could someone like her, someone who had been nothing but an outcast for so long, finally be accepted? The Alpha King's words were comforting, but a part of her still couldn't quite believe it. I don't know how to be anything but what I've always been, she confessed, her voice barely audible. Alexander reached out and gently placed his hand on hers, his touch reassuring. Then let me help you, he said. Let me show you that there is more to you than what you've believed. Together, we'll find a way forward. For the first time in years, Emma allowed herself to feel hope, to believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as broken as she had always thought. As Alexander stood there, offering her not just his protection, but his belief in her, she realized that the silence she had once seen as her shield had become the very thing holding her back. It was time to speak, time to be heard. And with Alexander by her side, maybe, just maybe, she could finally be the person she was meant to be. I have never felt this way before, Emma whispered, her breath catching in her throat. Her heart was racing, her mind a whirlwind of emotions as she looked up at Alexander. The weight of his words lingered in the air between them, and for the first time, she didn't feel like an outcast. She didn't feel like she was hiding anymore. Alexander, the Alpha King, stood before her, his expression a mixture of concern and something else, something deeper that she couldn't quite place. You've shown me more strength than I ever expected, he said softly. And I believe you can find your voice again. But you have to trust me. Emma swallowed hard, feeling the walls she had spent years building inside herself begin to crumble. She had always been afraid of rejection, afraid of what would happen if she truly let people in. But Alexander's words made her question everything she had known. Could she really trust him? Could she really be someone other than the silent, broken Omega she had always been? I'm not sure I can, Emma replied, her voice shaking. I've been silent for so long. I don't even know how to speak anymore. Alexander knelt down in front of her, his eyes meeting hers with such intensity that it took her breath away. Then I will help you, he said firmly. I won't push you, Emma, but I will be here, every step of the way. You don't have to face this alone. Emma closed her eyes for a moment, trying to steady her breathing. The Alpha King's presence was overwhelming, but in a way that felt safe. She didn't understand it, but she felt a sense of peace that she had never felt before. But what if I fail? Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. What if I can't be the person you think I am? Alexander's hand reached out, his fingers brushing lightly against hers. Then we will try again, he said, his voice calm and reassuring. Failure is not the end, Emma. It's just another step in finding who you truly are. Emma's heart skipped a beat as she looked into his eyes. The strength and kindness in his gaze were unlike anything she had ever known. For the first time, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could be more than what she had allowed herself to be. I don't know where to start, she admitted, her voice thick with emotion. Then let's take it one step at a time, Alexander said with a gentle smile. First, you need to learn to trust yourself. Once you do, everything else will fall into place. Emma nodded slowly, feeling a glimmer of hope spark inside her. It wasn't going to be easy, but she realized that for the first time in years, she was ready to try. As she looked at Alexander, she felt something shift inside her, something deep and unspoken. There was a bond between them, a connection she couldn't explain. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't as broken as she had always thought. Maybe she could find her voice again, with him by her side. I never imagined this day would come, Emma said, her voice trembling slightly as she looked at Alexander. The words felt strange on her tongue, like she had finally unlocked a part of herself she had long forgotten. She had spent years hiding behind silence, and now, standing before him, she felt a spark of something she hadn't felt in so long, hope. I didn't think I could ever be this open, she continued, her gaze drifting to the floor for a moment before meeting his once more. Alexander, who had always been a figure of strength and command, now seemed different. There was a gentleness in his eyes, a warmth that made Emma feel like maybe, just maybe, she could trust him completely. You don't have to hide anymore, Alexander said softly, his voice firm but kind. You've come so far, Emma. I believe in you. You've always had the strength, even if you didn't see it yourself. Emma felt her heart race as she listened to him. His belief in her felt like a weight lifting off her chest, a burden she hadn't realized she was carrying until it was gone. But still, a part of her was hesitant, uncertain. I don't know if I can do this, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. What if I fail? What if I'm not strong enough? Alexander stepped closer, his presence enveloping her like a protective shield. You don't have to be perfect, Emma, he said, his voice steady. You just have to keep moving forward, one step at a time. And I'll be here, every step of the way. I'm not asking you to be someone you're not. I'm asking you to be you. His words pierced through the doubt clouding her mind, and for the first time, Emma felt a sense of peace. She wasn't alone. She didn't have to be afraid anymore. The Alpha King was standing beside her, not as a ruler, but as someone who genuinely cared. I'm not used to this, Emma confessed, her voice softer now. I don't know how to trust someone like this. But I think I'm ready to try. Alexander smiled, a small but sincere smile that made Emma's heart flutter. That's all I'm asking for. You don't have to be perfect, Emma. You just have to be willing. Emma nodded, feeling a rush of emotion well up inside her. She was scared, yes, but she was also relieved. For the first time, she wasn't alone in her journey. And for the first time, she felt like she didn't have to hide. I think I'm ready, Emma whispered, more to herself than to Alexander. I think I'm ready to find my voice again. Alexander's smile widened, his gaze softening as he looked at her. Then let's start. Together. The words were simple, but they held so much weight. Emma took a deep breath, steadying herself, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of purpose. She wasn't broken. She wasn't alone. And with Alexander by her side, she knew she could begin to heal, to find herself again. It wouldn't be easy. There would be moments of doubt, moments of fear. But she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't alone anymore. Emma took a deep breath, standing before the Alpha King, the weight of her past and the uncertainty of her future pressing heavily on her. She had made the decision to trust him, to step out of the shadows of her silence and into a new chapter of her life. But as much as she had begun to believe in herself, the fear still lingered. I'm not sure where to start, Emma said, her voice barely a whisper as she glanced at Alexander. He stood before her, his presence a mixture of strength and patience, waiting for her to find the words she needed. Start with what feels right, he replied gently. Start with what makes you feel safe. Emma nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. She had spent so many years hiding, so many years pretending to be someone she wasn't, that it felt impossible to know where to begin. But she also knew that she couldn't keep running from herself. She had to face her past, her fears, and everything that had led her to this point. I've been silent for so long, Emma began, her voice shaking slightly. I don't know how to be anything but that. I don't know how to be me. Alexander stepped closer, his gaze soft yet unwavering. You're already more than you realize, he said, his voice calm and steady. You've been surviving, Emma. You've been living, even when it felt like you weren't. Emma felt a lump form in her throat as she looked up at him, his words sinking deep into her heart. She had been surviving, yes. But now, with Alexander by her side, she realized she wanted to live. She wanted to find out who she was beyond the silence. I don't know if I'm strong enough, she whispered, her hands trembling at her sides. Alexander's hand reached out, gently cupping her cheek. You don't have to be strong all the time, he said softly. Strength isn't about never feeling weak. It's about pushing through when it feels impossible. And you've already done that. Emma's heart fluttered as she looked into his eyes, feeling the sincerity of his words wash over her. For so long, she had believed she was too broken, too weak to ever be anything more. But Alexander's belief in her was starting to make her wonder if that wasn't true. Maybe she could be more. Maybe she didn't have to hide anymore. I'm ready to try, she said quietly, her voice filled with determination. I'm ready to be myself. A small smile tugged at Alexander's lips as he leaned down slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. Then let's start this journey together, he said, his voice filled with warmth. Emma nodded, feeling a surge of confidence she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't alone. She didn't have to be afraid anymore. Alexander was by her side, and with him, she felt like she could face whatever came next. As they stood there, in the quiet of the moment, Emma realized that this was only the beginning. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, and there would be times when doubt crept in. But for the first time in a long while, she felt like she had the strength to face it. And with Alexander beside her, she knew she wouldn't have to face it alone. Emma took a step forward, her breath steadying as she faced Alexander. The moment was quiet, almost peaceful, but the weight of everything they had shared in the past days settled heavily on her shoulders. She had come so far, and yet there was still so much ahead of her. The silence between them felt like a bridge, something fragile, something that could be broken at any moment, but also something that could lead to a new beginning. "Are you ready?" Alexander asked, his voice low but filled with genuine warmth. His eyes never left hers, and Emma felt a rush of emotion. Fear, hope, and something deeper she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. "I think I am," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. "I want to be." Alexander smiled, a soft, understanding smile that made Emma's heart flutter in a way she hadn't expected. He didn't say anything else, but his gaze told her everything she needed to know. He was there, with her, every step of the way. They had spent so many days in silence, so many nights with Emma hiding from herself, but now the silence had a new meaning. It was no longer just her shield, it was the space between them, where everything could change. "Then let's begin," Alexander said, his voice a soft command, but one that felt like an invitation. He reached out, offering her his hand. It wasn't just a gesture of trust, it was a promise. A promise that whatever happened next, they would face it together. Emma hesitated for only a moment before reaching out, her fingers brushing his. The touch was electric, sparking something deep within her. She had never allowed herself to feel this connection, this hope, this possibility. For the first time, she wasn't just a silent observer of her own life. She was ready to be part of something greater. "Where do we start?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, but full of determination. Alexander's smile grew wider, his eyes bright with a confidence that matched hers. "We start with you," he said simply. "With who you are. Not who you were, not who you think you should be. Who you are, right now." Emma nodded, her heart swelling with emotion. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in her life, she felt ready to find out. There would be struggles ahead. There would be moments when the past would try to drag her back, but for the first time, Emma knew she didn't have to face it alone. She had Alexander by her side, and together, they would face whatever came next. As the days passed, Emma found herself changing in small ways. She started to speak more, to express herself in ways she hadn't in years. At first, it was small, just a few words here and there, a sentence she never thought she would be able to say. But with every word, with every small step forward, she felt more like herself again. Alexander was always there, guiding her, but never pushing. He let her find her own pace, her own rhythm. He never made her feel like she was moving too slowly or that she wasn't doing enough. He simply believed in her, and that belief made all the difference. As the bond between them grew stronger, Emma realized something important. She didn't have to be afraid of who she was anymore. She didn't have to hide. She was more than the silence, more than the past that had defined her for so long. She was Emma Wilson, and with Alexander by her side, she was ready to discover who she could truly be. Emma stood at the edge of the balcony, looking out at the vast landscape that stretched before her. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm golden glow over the rolling hills, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she felt a sense of peace. Her life had changed so much in the past few weeks. It had been difficult, at times overwhelming, but it had also been liberating. The silence she had carried with her for years, the silence that had defined so much of her existence, was finally starting to fade. She wasn't fully there yet, but she could feel herself growing, evolving in ways she had never imagined. Alexander's presence behind her was a constant reminder of how far she had come. He had been with her every step of the way, guiding her, supporting her, but never forcing her. He had given her the space to discover who she truly was, and now, she was beginning to understand that she was more than just the Omega who had been cast aside. She was Emma Wilson, someone worthy of love, of respect, of a future. "You've come a long way." Alexander's voice broke through her thoughts, soft and comforting. He stood, just behind her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder, a gesture that had become so familiar, so reassuring. Emma turned slightly to look at him, feeling the warmth of his touch seep into her skin. "I never thought I would be here," she admitted, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I never thought I could be someone else." Alexander stepped closer, his expression tender but serious. "You've always been someone else, Emma. You just had to find her. And now, you're not just surviving anymore. You're living." Emma felt a lump form in her throat, her heart swelling with a mixture of gratitude and something deeper, something she had never allowed herself to feel before. It was vulnerability, and it was powerful. "I couldn't have done it without you," she whispered. "I never thought I could trust anyone again." Alexander smiled, his eyes full of understanding. "Trust is a difficult thing, especially when you've been hurt. But you took the first step, and that's more than many would ever do. You're stronger than you realize." Emma's heart skipped a beat as she looked into his eyes. For the first time, she felt like she truly understood what he meant. She wasn't weak. She wasn't broken. She was a person, just like everyone else, deserving of love, of kindness, of her own voice. "What happens now?" Emma asked, her voice quiet but filled with a new sense of determination. "Now, we continue," Alexander replied, his voice filled with quiet strength. "We continue to move forward. Together." Emma nodded, feeling a sense of certainty fill her chest. She wasn't sure what the future would hold, but for the first time in her life, she was ready to face it. With Alexander by her side, she felt like she could take on anything. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy. There would be challenges, doubts, and moments of fear. But for the first time, Emma knew she wasn't facing them alone. And with that thought, she stepped forward, ready to embrace whatever came next. Emma woke up to the soft light of the morning spilling through the windows, casting a golden glow across the room. She sat up slowly, her mind still lingering on the events of the past few days. It felt like a dream, like everything had shifted in such a short time. She wasn't sure when it had happened, but somewhere along the way, she had stopped being the Omega who hid in the shadows. She had stopped being afraid of herself. Alexander's presence had always been a constant, but now, it felt different. He wasn't just the Alpha King, the ruler she had once feared. He was someone she trusted, someone who had seen her at her weakest and still believed in her. It was a strange feeling, one that Emma was still getting used to. She had spent so many years hiding from the world, thinking she wasn't worth anyone's time or attention. But now, with Alexander by her side, she saw herself in a new light. She wasn't just an Omega. She wasn't just someone who had been discarded. She was someone worthy of love, of respect, and she realized that the love she had always longed for didn't have to come from anyone else. It had to come from within herself first. The realization brought a sense of peace she hadn't expected. She didn't need anyone to validate her worth anymore. She had already done that for herself. Emma stood up from the bed and walked to the window, taking a deep breath as the cool air filled her lungs. The world outside was vast and unknown, but for the first time, she felt like she could face it. She wasn't broken. She wasn't lost. She was exactly where she was meant to be. The soft knock on the door startled her, and she turned to see Alexander standing there, a gentle smile on his face. "Good morning," he said softly. "How are you feeling today?" Emma smiled back, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "I'm better," she said, her voice steady and sure. "I think I'm finally starting to understand what it means to live." Alexander stepped into the room, his presence filling the space with a calm energy. "I'm glad to hear that," he said, his voice full of quiet pride. "You've come so far, Emma. I'm proud of you." Emma felt her heart swell at his words, and for a moment, she simply stood there, looking at him, the man who had been with her through it all. "Thank you," she whispered, the words carrying more meaning than she had ever expressed before. "For everything." Alexander stepped closer, his gaze softening as he reached out and gently touched her arm. "You don't have to thank me," he said quietly. "I'm just here for you. You always had the strength within you. I just helped you see it." Emma's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but she didn't look away. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You showed me that I don't have to be afraid anymore." Alexander smiled warmly, his hand brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "You never needed to be afraid," he said softly. "You've always been capable of more than you knew. And now, I'm here to help you find it." Emma nodded, a quiet sense of gratitude filling her. She wasn't sure where the journey ahead would lead, but for the first time, she felt ready to face whatever came her way. With Alexander by her side, she felt like nothing could stop her. She wasn't just Emma the silent Omega anymore. She was Emma, the woman who had found her voice, her strength, and her place in the world. And as she looked at Alexander, she realized that the bond between them wasn't just about love. It was about trust, respect, and the willingness to grow together. Together, they could face anything. The morning air was crisp as Emma stepped out onto the balcony, the sunlight breaking through the trees and casting a warm glow over the land. It was quiet, peaceful, and for the first time, Emma felt truly at peace within herself. The journey she had been on, the one that had seemed impossible not too long ago, had led her here, to this moment of calm. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew now that she was ready for whatever came. Alexander had stood by her through every challenge, every moment of doubt, and now, standing together in this new chapter, Emma realized that she wasn't the same person she had once been. She was stronger, braver, and most importantly, she was free. She had found her voice, and in doing so, had found herself. Alexander approached her quietly, as if sensing the shift within her, the transformation that had taken place. He stood beside her, his presence comforting and steady. "You look different," he said softly, his voice carrying a note of admiration. Emma smiled, turning to face him, her heart full of warmth. "I feel different," she replied, her voice filled with a quiet confidence she hadn't known she possessed before. "For the first time, I feel like I'm truly living." Alexander's eyes softened as he looked at her. "You've always been living, Emma," he said. "But now, you're truly awake to it. You're no longer hiding from yourself." Emma felt her chest tighten, a sense of gratitude washing over her. She had never imagined that something like this could be possible, that she could be so open, so whole. And yet, here she was, standing before the Alpha King, not as a broken Omega, but as a woman who had come into her own. "I don't know what I would have done without you," she said, her voice quiet but sincere. Alexander placed his hand gently on hers, his touch warm and reassuring. "You would have found your way, Emma," he said softly. "But I'm glad I could be here to help you see it. You've always had the strength within you." Emma nodded, the truth of his words sinking deep into her heart. She had always believed she was weak, that she wasn't worthy of love or kindness. But now, with Alexander by her side, she knew that wasn't true. She was worthy of everything she had ever dreamed of, and more. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice filled with a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. "Now," Alexander began, his eyes locking with hers, "we take the next step. Together. Whatever that looks like." Emma's heart swelled with emotion. Together. It was the first time she had ever felt truly supported, truly seen. And for the first time, she felt like the future was hers to shape. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady with newfound certainty. "Ready to see what comes next." As they stood there, side by side, Emma realized that she was no longer the quiet, invisible Omega she had once been. She was strong, she was seen, and most of all, she was loved. And with Alexander by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next, knowing that together, they could conquer anything.